Okay, in this video I'm going to take a look at the Lambda maps. Now, this edc16 file has 4 Lambda maps, 3 similar looking ones and one that looks slightly different. The odd one doesn't seem to be functioning at all, which leaves us 3 similar ones, and a closer look at the 3 similar ones confirms that they are not just similar, they are identical, which means that there is in effect one map. And so I've decided to call them Lambda 1, 2 and 3, and there is only any point in looking at Lambda 1 as it's the only one in the sense that all 3 are the same. Now here's the map again, taken straight from the original file. So these are Lambda values, and if we assume that the designers who put these values together knew what they were doing and that these values make perfect sense for this file, then there is no reason why we would want to change the values. The only problem we have is that the chart or the graph or the map, whatever you want to call it, at the moment only runs to 900 milligrams per stroke, which of course is less than we've changed the smoke map, boost map, etc., to. So in other words, we've made changes which utilize figures bigger than 900. Now, if you want to put that into simpler figures or figures that make more sense compared to the smoke map was in pressure, and so what I've done is just here I've converted this axis. So the data here is the same as the data there, but the axis here is in math, so in other words it's mass airflow. So what I've done is I've converted it here to pressure. I've used the figure that VW seem to have used. They've seemed to have used 450 milligrams per stroke, so I've just made a note of that there. They seem to have used 450 milligrams per stroke for 1,000 millibars of pressure. So what I've done is I've taken their figures, and so 300 as an airflow would be 667 millibars, and 900 would be 2,000 or 2 bars, and 1,000 would equate to 450. In other words, because they appear to have used 450 to 1,000 millibars, or 450 to 1 bar. So that's the calculation I've used to produce this axis. And then if we look at the end of the axis, I've highlighted it in yellow for these last 3 columns, simply to point out that these last 3 columns are the same. So if we were to create a new column, let's say an extra column for 2200, because if I go back to here, we created an extra column for 2200. If we were to do that, then it would be a 2200 column that we would want to create, but we would use the same figures presumably, because if they were good enough for basically 1800, 1900 and 2000, then presumably they're good enough for 2200, 2200. So I'm sticking with those figures. Now the problem is, of course, is that I can't tag this on the end, because if I want this to be part of this map, then it has to be in that map. I can't just add it on the end. So if I redesign that map, I say to myself, okay, here's exactly the same data that I've got there. I've just moved it over here to make it easier to work on. I could look at this and I could say to myself, well, okay, what shall I do? Shall I shift one of these out? Shall I take one out? Now, when I did this one here with these figures here for the smoke map, you can see how I left the first 4 alone, and then I put in the new section, as it were. In other words, I created a new value and moved everything to the left. So we could do exactly the same thing here. There is no specific reason why I would choose to do that exactly, but I mean, we could do that. We could say, okay, I'll leave those 4, as they are. So I've got 1, 2, 3 and 4, and I'll leave those alone. And what I'll do is I will literally get rid of that column. So I will take that column out completely. So I will clear all the contents from that column. So that one's now gone completely. And then what I will do is I will, sorry, I'll just cut that column out and then replace it further over. So I will paste it in there. And now all I need to do is to cut that column and put it on the end, and now I've got the same size as my original, the only difference being that one block of it, this block here, has been shifted in to allow us to have an extra column on the end. Now all we now need is to have these numbers back again, because what we'd like is for it to read like that in terms of lambda. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply copy all of this. So I'm just going to copy that and paste it there. I'm just going to double check and tell it to keep values and number formatting only. For some peculiar reason it's decided it wants to make these silly highlights here. So I'll just tell it that I don't want that to be bold, and then I'll tell it that I do want those to be bold, so that now that looks like that, that looks like that, so that's an exact copy of that. So the only thing I want that's any different is this bit here, because I want it to go back to looking like that one there. So I want the whole thing to go back the way it was, because I've gone from here to there. In other words, I've gone from milligrams per stroke to millibars. So now I want to just pop back the other way. So what I need to do is literally turn the whole thing back on its head. So I need to take, I need that number there to be equal to that number times 450 times 0.001, and I want to format that so that it is a number with no decimal points, and it's taken me back to my original 300. I'll make it bold as well, and now I'll just drag that across so that they're all the same, and there we go. We have now got a new, so we've got a new modified Lambda map. And again, I'll just make that bold so it stands out a bit more clearly. And so here we've got our Lambda map, original, additional column that we wanted to add, additional column now added, and now axis converted back to match the original one. So this is now our new Lambda map, and so this could be placed back into the original file. Job done, new axis point with new set of data. Now why would I want to bother to do that? Well, it's possible I wouldn't need to do it at all. It depends what the file is doing and how it's handling things. The file may only be using this, the IQ limit by map, in which case I do not need to touch the Lambda map. But it's also possible that the ECU file is using both of these sets of maps. It's using this map as a reference set as well as the figures for the map sensor. So it's not a bad idea to change this one just in case. Now what I would normally suggest to people is that they change this one but didn't load it. In other words, stop when you get to your file creation and you've got your smoke map changed, and I wouldn't bother to change the Lambda maps. I would then try the mappings out that you've made, so all the changes that you've made, and if things are not quite behaving as you expected, then I would consider making changes to the Lambda map. Now it is possible to search through the map and try to work out how important the Lambda maps are, but it's quite difficult because it means you've got to find various little switches which are telling the ECU file when to use the different maps, and they're not always in the same place in different files. So even if you find a switch in one file that says yes, this Lambda map is going to be used, that switch might be in a different place in a different file, so it can be quite difficult to pin down exactly which bits are being used and when they're being used. So I often say to people, well, why not just change the original smoke map, whether it's MAF or map based, and try the file out, and then if you're suspicious that things are not quite as they should be, then change the Lambda and see what difference that makes. Now it's also worth pointing out that buried in amongst all of these maps there are often small little two-dimensional maps which are also involved in MAF smoke limits, map smoke limits and Lambda smoke limits, and so if things do not behave as you expected after a remap, it's often worth looking for any other little values that might be in there that you haven't spotted, because it's possible that the file is using a little two-dimensional map that you haven't changed. So when you've got problems, have a good poke around and see if you can find anything else that might be involved in what's going on. Right, I'll stop there, and hopefully that gives you a little bit more insight into how Lambda is involved in your file.